everyone, and welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails, the weekly podcast that helps you grow your business, improve your life, and enjoy yourself along the way. I'm your host, Alan Langer, and every week we try to bring you the best thought leaders, the best business leaders, and the best minds out there to help you succeed in business and in life. So sit back, relax, grab your pad, your pen, and your favorite beverage, and enjoy the next episode of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 7 of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. I got another great guest for you tonight. This was a little outside the box. That's what I try to do on this podcast. Not going to just talk about marketing and sales every single day and be boring. We got to be a little exciting. And what I have for you tonight is a young gentleman who's actually making quite a name for himself on LinkedIn with basically physical activity. I'm going to I'll let him tell you about that. But he's got a little niche going on to help people be healthier, especially with what's been going on with COVID-19. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Drew Hulburt, and Drew is going to join us. Now, here's the interesting thing. So we talk about cocktails on this show. I have a little Grey Goose tonight on the rocks, but Drew is 20 years old. Oh, Drew cannot be joining me tonight for a cocktail. However, I think he has some water or Gatorade or whatever he has. So Drew Hulburt, welcome to Marketing and Sales Over Water, or whatever we want to call it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it, man. It's an honor to be here, and I was so happy I got your invitation. You know, I love spreading my message and trying to help as many people as possible. So when someone gives me that opportunity, I'm always ready to do it.
That's awesome. Like when I first saw your stuff, like I said, it was impressive, and it also, for me, it was just completely different. Like everybody's doing the same thing on LinkedIn. You get a lot of the chatter and the noise and the talking heads, and a lot of it you just don't even pay attention to. But then I saw your stuff, and I'm like, wow, this guy's really got a little niche here. He's got something, and I stopped and listened to you, and I still listen to your videos. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you kind of got into this area of trying to help people who basically are sitting all day, and how to keep them healthy. If I'm assuming that's a good description of it.
Yeah, it's a very good description of it. And with the whole situation, how things are currently, it's a big problem for more and more people. A little bit about how I got into it, I'll come back to that. But what I do basically is I take people's environments, and they don't necessarily understand how it's affecting their body. And I just give them the tools, and I show them the training that they can use to essentially counterbalance all the negative effects that are created by spending all your day on a laptop, on a cell phone, sitting in a car, all that stuff that you can't get away from in some sense. Mm-hmm. And I just created training that essentially was designed to counterbalance it. That was my only intention. I found in the health and wellness industry that, you know, obviously there's a lot of talk about fat loss. And I'm a personal trainer that will never talk to you about fat loss, which is kind of a thing that I knew immediately put me out of the regular personal trainer. That's not what I wanted to do. And it's from a very personal reason, you know, because I dealt with these problems myself in high school. It was in high school, I was training to join the Marines. That was like what I wanted to do. And So I spent all my time kind of working out and getting into good shape, because I was not in good shape at all. I was kind of that scrawny little kid, couldn't do pull-ups, couldn't do push-ups or any of that stuff. So a pursuit of fitness for the reason of joining the Marine Corps kind of sped up my process of dealing with the problems that most professionals deal with on a regular basis. Because I was sitting in school just like most people would sit at a job, at a desk, on a computer, on my cell phone, working on whatever, you know, the busy work that they had me doing at the time. And I found neck pain, low back pain, hip problems, like just tight everything. My muscles were sore all the time. And I was like, why is this the way that, like, I couldn't figure it out. And it actually led to some injuries that I didn't necessarily understand why. And I was like, this is a problem. If I'm going to join the Marines, I need to figure out what this stuff is. So I started self-educating myself on the body, physiology, anatomy, and starting to understand it. And I stumbled across this problem of, when you sit down all day and then you try to take care of yourself, you try to be healthy and active, you actually can make problems worse for yourself if you're not going about it quite the right way. So I adjusted my training, fixed those injuries. It took me like 6 months or so before I was able to work out again. after that first like low back problem that I had. And it was an eye-opening experience, very humbling, like, to really go from the place where I was really confident what I knew to feeling like I know nothing, going back up to it. And then that problem, when the Marine Corps didn't work out for me due to a peanut allergy. So I have a anaphylactic peanut allergy. Yeah, it's had to carry the EpiPen in high school and that kind of stuff. And I was told by the recruiters at the time, they're like, oh, we'll get you a waiver. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And when I got down to swear in, the guy at MEPS, Master Sergeant, pulled me out and he was like, hey, we got this on your waiver. I just need you to sit here, hang tight, and we'll come back to you. And that was like 4 hours went by, and then the guy who brought me there showed up and he was not happy. And that was kind of my experience with that. And when that fell through,
and that was like your dream, right?
Yeah, it was a big thing.
That's a huge blow.
From probably 9th grade, freshman year, all the way till a year after graduation, like 5 years, I was putting everything into it. From a training perspective, I was doing Go Ruck events. They're like these 40+ mile endurance events where you got to carry a bunch of weights and learn how to read maps and swimming in pools and, just doing crazy stuff because I knew it was going to be hard, and I knew like I needed to be as tough as possible in some sense. And that is what made these problems for me so much faster. A lot of people don't run into the real big issues until they're kind of later in life in some sense, because they're not necessarily training that hard. It takes a little bit more time for everything to come through. And that's a good thing because you don't have to deal with it. But if you don't address it in some sense, it just creeps up and creeps up and creeps up. And then it's going to take longer to get out of those things. So the problems like the low back pain, neck pain, just shoulder issues, all that stuff that's super common, like rotator cuff tears and things like that. Like if you go to a gym, like half of everyone there, of the guys lifting weights have torn their rotator cuff or, have a blown out ACL and that kind of stuff. And that's all really common because of our environment. And I noticed that when the Marine Corps fell through, I was like, all right, I guess I need to pivot. I did some flipping for a while, like eBay and Amazon and going to yard sales, like just a kind of typical grind kind of stuff, wait tables, kind of putting all my money together. I was fortunate enough that I had saved everything from high school because I knew the Marine Corps wasn't going to pay a whole lot and I needed to have some funds for myself when I went in, and basically for plane tickets. And so when I had all that stuff saved up, it was like, all right, well, I think that this is a place where I could really help some people. So I spent some of that money on some certifications and like started getting, some formal training. I got a job at a gym for like 3 months and it just, it was like a big corporate gym, they kind of funneled people in and just sent them right out the door. And I was like, I can't really help people here. So got that job, quit that job. And it was just so I could say, yeah, I used to work at a gym, when I got my first clients for my business, I didn't tell them the 3 months part,
Right, exactly.
But a little bit of prior experience for how the whole personal training situation worked, what not to do. I learned a lot of that when I was at that job. And I found a gym that was willing to let me come in there and start training people and one-on-one, started doing some marketing, awful Facebook marketing. I know kind of figuring that out, stumbling through it, got a couple clients and really kind of had great results with those people right out the gate. And it kind of affirmed my confidence that this was a space that people weren't talking about. And that my clients were people that had like been to other trainers and they're like, look, they haven't addressed these problems properly for me. And the workouts that I'm doing are making things worse. And that's why I can't do them consistently. And so I took a little bit more of a tailored approach to it in some sense. And when you leave a workout feeling better than when you started, you're going to do it more often. Like there's no getting around that. Right. And when you can create that for someone, it makes a big difference in their health. So the problems of your work environment and when you're staring down at your cell phone, like that's not necessarily an issue. That itself isn't. But it's the thing that comes afterwards. It's the fact that, okay, well, if I'm looking down, the muscles on the back of my neck are going to get really lengthened out and really weak. And the ones on the front are going to get really tight to oversimplify the problem in some sense. And that's going to lead to a little bit of an off balance. And That'll adjust how certain things move. And that might not even be a problem itself. But then it starts getting to the mid back and the shoulders. And that's when things, okay, well, now I can't like get overhead without a little bit of, discomfort in my shoulder for some reason. And now like when I just always feel like the inside of my shoulder really hurts. Like I just want to rub, like there's a knot here and I don't really know why. That stuff starts to turn into a problem. And if you're doing push-ups 24/7, trying to stay in shape, trying to get up, trying to get big, that stuff's only going to, in some sense, speed up your timeline to getting an injury. And I call them sitting injuries because it's not like getting hit by a bus. It's not just something you can't do anything about. If you're sitting down all day, you're in a negative position is what I call it. These things will come in time, but it's not going to be quick. It's kind of the death by 1,000 cuts. It's just real slow. It catches up with you as time goes on. And I always thought like an exercise routine should address those things. It should really make that stuff better and not worse.
All right. So for people who are listening, especially with what's been happening since March, with COVID, everyone has been home. Obviously, we're getting, that's waking up a little bit, but everyone's been home, been on computers more than they ever have been. Not even getting out to going meeting people like salespeople used to go. I would go out on appointments all day long, and at least I was moving around a little bit, and that's stopped. And people are now hunched over their computers, and you're right, this is where the pain starts. So for the people listening, what is something like, something quick? I know you did a presentation for my networking group last week. Something that they could do right away that would help immediately try to alleviate pain or prevent the pain from happening.
It's going to be determined by what the particular issue is itself. So that's the first thing. Is all problems are somewhat unique. But when it comes to that, we have to understand what's causing the discomfort at an anatomical perspective. If you're having neck discomfort because you're looking at a laptop all day, they say, I'm looking at a laptop, my neck is hurting. Okay, let's peel that apart for a second. The thing that is actually hurting is the back of your neck. For some people, it's up by their skulls, and it's like down kind of by the base of their traps in different areas. But the reason is because that muscle is being chronically lengthened. It's a muscle attaches at multiple different points. And when it contracts, it shortens. And when it lengthens, it lengthens. There's more space between the 2 points of contact that it attaches. So if you have a muscle that connects your cervical extensors, connect up underneath the base of your skull, and they run down into your back. If you're looking down constantly, you're pulling on those muscles. You're essentially pulling the slack out of it, and to make it very simple. And when you're in that position for a prolonged period of time, when a muscle is in its lengthened position and you put tension on it for a prolonged period of time, you now start to stretch the rest of the connective tissue. And all right, so that's what's actually hurting. So now you understand what the actual discomfort is. It's like, well, this is chronically stretched. The opposite of a chronically stretched muscle is a tight and strong muscle. So one thing that you can do to immediately alleviate some discomfort is myofascial release. Now that's going to feel really good. That's kind of, if you were to take your hand and kind of actually give yourself a massage in those areas that feel uncomfortable, or use a tennis ball, or use some different modalities. Someone else could do it. It's all the same thing. That's going to feel good in some sense, but it's not going to correct the problem. It'll help you to correct the problem because it will allow you a little bit of time to actually do some training and fix that stuff without too much discomfort. So there's utility in it. But the real thing that you need to do to alleviate that is actually strengthen those muscles. So there's corrective exercises you can do to strengthen those muscles that are chronically stretched so you can realign your head. Because if your head's always hanging down, then there's going to be some secondary problems created by that, which will be the front of your neck is tight, right? And if that gets tight and you're trying to sit up all the time, you're trying to get your head back on top of your shoulders, well, you're fighting gravity and you're fighting the muscles on the front of your neck, because your body's really, really good at connecting the positions you spend time in and adapting to them. It just recognizes them and says, oh, you're going to spend 8 hours a day here? Cool, we'll get used to this. And when it does that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if we were the Wally people and we spent all of our time here, like we never had to get up, this wouldn't be an issue and I wouldn't have a job, right? But The idea is you have to retrain the muscles and strengthen them so they can realign themselves. And that takes time, just like any exercise program would. It takes time to strengthen things. So if it's your hips are tight because you're sitting down all day, yes, you're going to need to lengthen your hip flexors because they're going to be tight from being in a 90-90 flex position all day. But you're also going to need to strengthen whatever those antagonist muscle groups are. For the hips, it'd be the glutes. You got to make that stuff stronger. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly running into this chronic tightness, and realign, create the equilibrium between different muscles and at different joints, because that's really the thing that's causing discomfort for people.
Right.
It's a lack of balance in some sense. Your body's too good at being in one position, and you need to create balance. And you can do that very intentionally. A lot of people will just say, "Oh, we'll get up and walk around." It's like, it's not intentional enough. It'll work. It'll help, but it won't fix it. And it doesn't take much to fix it. You just have to know, in some sense, what the right thing is, so you can spend your time doing just that and tackle kind of one problem at a time.
So let me ask you a question. So what you're saying, I'm going to tell you a little experience that I had. So when I didn't have a home office. I was always out. I wrote my entire book in a coffee shop. I'm a very social person. I go out. I love to go out and do my work outside of the house. So COVID happens. Now I'm forced to give myself a home office. As you can see, I'm now comfortable here. But the front of my desk has a little raised area, like a little shelf, so I can put stuff underneath it. And before I got my laptop, I had a desktop, and I put the screen, basically it was at head level, right in front of me. And about a week later, the back of my neck was killing me because it seemed like I was keeping my head up the whole time. Mm-hmm. And then when I got my laptop and I moved it down to here, the pain went away. And I found that really odd, because I thought, I was like, well, I figured this would be better because I'm looking straight ahead and then down. But the back of my neck started killing me. Is that because I'm so used to being like this and that's why it hurt?
So it could be a couple different things. One of two. The first one, which could be, you could just be sitting up straight in a incorrect position. Sometimes if you're leaning forward, maybe just a little too much, or leaning back just a little too much, right? It could be a matter of how you're actually spending time in that position. That could be one thing, right? Maybe your chin's just pushed a little too far forward, and that's creating a little bit of discomfort back here, something like that. Right. But the more likely culprit of something like this is when you have spent that accumulated time in that prolonged position. And you got to look at this not from a perspective of, well, yesterday I spent a lot of time on the computer. It's like, how much time, if you think about it, have you spent in the last 10 years looking at a computer? Like, well, really, because if you don't work to undo it, it just adds up. And that's really what people are fighting against. It's not like, oh, the muscle's a little tight. It's like, no, this is 10 years of chronic, not addressing this problem, tightness that's built up. So it's going to take a little while to go away. So with that perspective of, okay, this is something that's really, really long as far as time duration. The next thing is, well, if I just think the next day, after 10 years of just doing that, I'm going to be able to sit up for the 8 hours and totally be able to maintain that without any problems at all. It's like, well, it's like going into the gym, putting 405 on the bar, putting it on your back, like, I'm going to squat today. First time. It's just it's an unrealistic approach in some sense. But the thing seems so simple and so small. Well, I'll just sit here. I'll raise my monitor. It'll work. It seems so easy that we don't give it necessarily the credit that we would something else. It's a big change for your physiology and for your anatomy to spend 8 hours in a new position that you haven't spent any time in before.
That
right?
Makes sense.
And so that's
I didn't think about it that way.
That's really what it is. And so when I've had people ask me, it's like, well, what do? Do you just tell people to sit up straight all day? It's like, well, no, not exactly. But yeah, it's part of it. But the thing that really helps people is the fact that I can give them some training. Says, all right, every day do this. Do this training for 30 minutes a day. If you're going to work out, it's 30 minutes at-home workout. And what you'll find is, for 30 minutes, the way that any muscle is strengthened is you create a stimulus, and you let it recover. It gets a little bit stronger. And you do that repeatedly, and you progressively overload it with different, whether it's with more weight, a little bit more time, less rest in between sets. That's just progressive overload 101. The same things apply for this. So you train those muscles and you get that stuff to be a little bit stronger. And then over time, you naturally start to come back into that position a little bit more. And so it's like, instead of forcing yourself consciously to try and spend time in that new position, it's a lot easier to strengthen the muscles a little bit at a time and let them move you into that new position on their own, because they will do it if you provide them the right stimulus. Trying to consciously sit up straight all the time, in some sense, is almost an impossible task, because it's something that goes to our subconscious nervous system, because we have to think about other things. We have to think about the work we're doing, whatever the task is at hand. We can't constantly be thinking about, I need to sit up straight and make sure I have good posture. Like, that's unrealistic and ridiculous.
Right.
So the idea is train people in a way that where these things start to naturally occur. And then you start to get a positive feedback loop of, I do this training, it makes me sit up straight, I sit up more straight, and the training gets easier. And so this stuff kind of compounds on itself, which is fantastic, because that's kind of the approach and why that stuff happens, and why that approach is difficult for so many. There's a lot of products out there to kind of like remind you to sit up straight. And I don't think they're necessarily bad products, but I don't think they're entry-level products, because you run into issues just like that.
So the products you mean are like, you see the ads, or like they put the little thing on your back, and when you slouch, it like gives you a buzz or something.
Yeah.
Sit up. So are you saying those things are not helpful, or they're...
So there's a place for everything. And I actually think it's a really good product. But I would say for someone who has who's really had an issue with this, it's too much at one time, in some sense. To think, like you were saying, to think you're going to go from, well, I slouch constantly for the last 10 years to, well, I'm just going to sit up straight all the time. There's no way. And it's going to be way more uncomfortable in some sense. And if you have this thing that's constantly buzzing, making you feel bad about it, it's like, well, that's not positive either, and so that's kind of the approach of, well, maybe you have good posture already. You just want a little bit of extra, thing that you can have during the day. I don't see that one as an entry level product in some sense. The other thing it doesn't address is, particular issues. Some people, what the root problem is different for everybody. And for laptops, most of the time it's head position, because you do have to look a little bit. You have to look down. Your hands have to be together. And that creates a tight chest, tight shoulders, forward head position. So for laptops, it's pretty much all universally the same. But you run into people that have kind of different habits or different situations. And if you don't take the time to understand those in some sense and really give them a thorough assessment and say, okay, what's really the problem here? You might have someone that has low back pain that's coming from the way that they walk because of the shoes they wear, which is something that you wouldn't think is posture related at all. But really, that's going to make a big difference in how someone sits, and when they sit down in a chair, if they slouch or not. That can be a huge factor in it. Something as simple as like how they walk in their gait, the type of shoes they wear. And often the problem is coming from a place deeper than what it's presenting itself as. Wherever the pain might be coming from doesn't necessarily indicate that to be the main source of it. And so finding whatever that root causal thing is sometimes takes time. And just a blanket approach of sit up straight is useful, but it doesn't account for all the nuances in some sense.
Yeah. And that's what I love about what you talk about. It's not just, all of these, I've even done, I've had some clients who own gyms and they have their training regimens, but it's always like, you go to the gym and you do these specific workouts and you're like, you kind of get down to the micro stuff of it. Like, what is the root cause of this problem? And we got to fix this before you can even work out properly. So I really like that approach, because I really don't see that anywhere. It's just like, get to the gym, do the gyms where you do the all fit or whatever it's called. I can't remember the name, but you got all these different, these different terms now, and it's just a different workout. So I think what you're doing is pretty unique. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I found that there was just a lack. Like, the fitness industry is a low entry industry, and I'm an example of that. You don't necessarily need a lot of credential to get into it and start working with people. And, that's has positives and negatives. It allows for a lot of quick innovation, but it also allows for a lot of misinformation.
Yep.
And one of the things about the fitness industry that I'm acutely aware of and try to be very, very conscious of when I'm putting myself out there and putting out content and kind of talking to people is the fact that everyone has been sold a bill of goods for the last 10 years on this is the quick fix to this. This is the new thing. This is the new way to do it, right? And none of that stuff ever worked or is ever true. It really never is. There's very simple principles to this, and the basics work. And when you start to understand those things, you see results. And a lot of the times, with some of my clients that I'd like to train in person, and we're doing Zoom calls now, but they come in because they have a particular issue of my back hurts and I cannot work out and I can't stay healthy because I can't fix this. I've been to the physical therapist and they say there's everything looks fine, but I don't feel good. And what should I do? That's a very common story in some sense.
I can see that definitely.
And so someone comes in and they start working. And it's like, well, after 6 months, not only is their pain gone, but they've lost 10 inches and they've lost 20 pounds. It's like, well, that's because you worked out for 6 months consistently. Right. And they've never done that before because they typically ran into this problem of, well, my back hurts. And I haven't been able to find something that I can do that doesn't make it worse. Right. So when you work around these different problems and you figure out, and that it doesn't take too much of an understanding, but it does take the time to assess and understand these problems and then start to explore them. You can create a lot of progress for people very simply by staying consistent. That's it. Yeah. And so that problem of one, get in shape is often there's a barrier to entry of, well, you have to have proper movement. And if you don't move properly, you're never going to get in shape and stay in shape for any prolonged period of time. And if you do try, it's just going to be way harder than it needs to be. That's what I tell people all the time. Working out for me is a breeze because I know exactly what I'm doing wrong when I do it. Right. And so I don't have to put in any extra effort, and it doesn't hurt in some sense. It doesn't hurt. And that's the thing that really makes it easy for me to stay in shape now, for my clients to stay in shape and to get results and that kind of stuff because they understand those things instead of, well, this exercise is great for a six pack and this one's good for biceps. It's like, yeah, cool, I guess. But, how does that really help me?
So when you did your little presentation, I shouldn't say little, it was a great presentation, but when you did your presentation for my group, one of the guys, John, who was on the group, said that he changed his habits about a year ago where he doesn't sit anymore. And it sounded very extreme because he says, so for the people who are listening, we have this guy named John, we call him Monty. He says he literally does not sit at his desk anymore. And then every hour his phone goes off and he does 20 push-ups all day long. And everyone on the call is like, oh my God, that's extreme. But he says he's in the best shape of his life. So that, I'm going to toss it to you. That sounds extreme, but do you recommend at least standing a little bit during the day or getting up, moving around, doing push-ups every hour, like just doing something rather than just sitting there? I would think you would, but I don't know what would you tell people to do during the day to kind of wake their body up a little bit?
So there's a couple different things. The first one is like when it comes to standing up, I'm sitting down right now. I sit down in a chair, and I do have a standing desk. I kind of go back and forth between the two of them because I do like to do some pretty intense workouts, and recovery is important in some sense. If you have a really tough leg day, if you really like to get after it, you're in the gym. If that's you might need to sit down for the next day afterwards, just to kind of let things heal and recover. That's pretty acceptable. Now, when it comes to standing all day, this is the other thing that people should keep in mind. If you've never done that, don't think that it's going to be easy because it's not. And the other thing is if you've never done it, you can do it wrong.
Yeah. And, I don't like standing for an extended period of time.
If you are leaning on your desk one way or start to lean onto your desk in particular ways, you can run into just as many problems that you would sitting down. Right. And that's so a standing desk is a great tool to have. Like all tools, it's how you use it. So standing with proper technique on shoes or no shoes in an ideal world. If you're at home at a standing desk, no shoes, and you're standing with proper posture, you're not leaning on things, like that's fantastic. And going back and forth between that, or even working up progressively over the course of 6 months, you're going to go from I sit down most of the day to I sit down none of the day. Kind of setting a timeline for yourself, being progressive about it. That is always beneficial. But if you're not looking to go that route, but you are looking to say, okay, what do I do? I said earlier in the podcast, just getting up and walking around is good, but it's not great. It's like, if you're going to take the time to do that, there's a couple other things that you could do that are going to give you a lot more benefit, essentially more bang for your buck. Same amount of time, same amount of effort, but
okay,
you're going to get more out of it. And that's some targeted stretches and some targeted strengthening. So if you're sitting at a chair, or if you're sitting in a chair, your hip flexors are shortened because your hips or your knees are up at 90 degrees. So a stretch for those is great. And something to strengthen your glutes, the antagonist muscle of your hip flexors, to kind of help to rebalance that, is also going to be very beneficial. A hip flexor stretch done properly, and that's something I'll talk about after this, done properly can really be it can be a key in a door that just unlocks so much. It really can change from a back pain perspective, from just sitting at the desk, from your gait, how you move, just how your hips function, everything. It can unlock a ton of stuff, but it all comes down to the detail of the execution. That's the other thing in the fitness industry. It's like there's a million different ways to do one different exercise. So many people will tell you different stuff about it. And my lens and my perspective has always been what's going to get the most return for the minimal investment. Right? That's kind of the way that I see it. So a hip flexor stretch done properly looks like you're in a split squat position. So you got a 90-90 position of your legs. One knee's on the ground, your foot's on the ground, your one leg's out behind you. You make a box essentially with the front of your legs, and you got a 90-degree flex at the front knee, and you don't stretch. You don't try to lean forward. That's the wrong way of approaching most stretch. The way you really stretch something is you squeeze and you really tighten whatever its opposite thing is. And so that's a great way to think about it. If you were to be in a hip flexor stretch position, don't lean forward. Squeeze your glute as hard as you can. And you're neurologically, you're just connecting to those muscle fibers. You're firing them, which will strengthen them, not to a huge degree, but it will make them stronger, and it will make your neurological connection to that area stronger, which is really what strength is in some sense. And then at the same time, while you're doing that, you will be lengthening your hip flexor. So you're doing 3 things at once in some sense, 2 minutes on each side, like that's 4 minutes total. You can walk around after, and you'll feel like you walk differently after doing that, because your gait will change, your hips will open, the way it really makes a big difference. But I've seen a million videos, maybe not a million, I've seen a couple hundred videos of hip flexor stretches on Instagram, and they're just wrong. And it's like, well, okay, maybe they're not wrong, but they don't benefit the most in some sense. It's just not optimal. And for me, not optimal, I just blanket as wrong in some sense. Maybe that's a little cruel, but
no, it's true. And by the way, folks, he's basically saying to squeeze your ass, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
and what strength is, and a lot of people get this mixed up, is not how strong your muscles are. That's not what strength is. Strength is your ability to contract a muscle. Those aren't the same thing. You've kind of heard the stories in some sense, where someone's in a life or death situation and they do a phenomenal feat of strength. They lift something that's like really crazy heavy. Like, what is that? Our muscles are incredibly strong, and the way that we're built is very resilient. Most people can, if we could take away the limitation that our brain puts on our muscles, you could flex your tricep, squeeze your tricep till you're ripped your bicep off the tendon and broke your arm backwards. Your arm is strong enough to do that. Almost everybody's is. The problem is our brain already has a safety mechanism put in place, so we don't do that, right? It doesn't want us to hurt ourselves. And so to the degree that we can contract a muscle is actually the limiting factor of strength. If you talk to any professional powerlifters, professional strongmen. They talk about this a lot because it's, yes, they need to be bigger and yes, they need to have more muscle fiber, but really the thing that they need to get good at if they want to be strong per pound in some sense, be competitive, is how much force they can get out of the muscle. And that's what Arnold Schwarzenegger would refer to as mind-muscle connection, getting that pump. If anyone, has watched Pumping Iron, when he talks about getting the mind inside the muscle, what he's vaguely referring to is neurological connection. And that is really strength. And so when you just flex a certain muscle, it's all it takes is to squeeze your glute. When you're in a hip flexor stretch, squeeze your butt as hard as you can. You're strengthening those muscles because you're strengthening your neurological connection to that area. That will make it stronger. You don't necessarily need to go put weights and do resistance training initially, right? If you want to put more mass there, do hypertrophy, get more muscle size in some sense, yes, you'd have to go do those things, do some progressive overload. But if you're looking to just get stronger, isometric contractions will do just fine. And so that hip flexor stretch with the isometric contraction of squeezing the glute for that prolonged period of time makes a huge difference. And at the same time, lengthens the hip flexor because if you think muscles are constantly pulling back and forth against one another to create movement. And one muscle is tightened, the other one is forced to relax. And that process is called reciprocal inhibition. It's our body's natural way of allowing us to move back and forth between things, between different angles of flexion. When one thing is tightening, the other is loosening. That's how we have balance. And so you can use that principle to essentially rebalance everything very simply. And it doesn't take too much. And with joints like the hips and the knees, elbows, things like that are real simple in some sense, ball and socket. The shoulders are where things get a little bit more complex in the spine because there's so many intricate joints. There's a lot of there's a lot of connection points as far as like where things are connecting to. But when it comes to limbs, it's pretty simple. And the hips is kind of that same way. Just squeeze one thing, the opposite one lengthens, and you can use that principle to your advantage for really starting to create that balance and reestablish that stuff. So if that's what you were going to do just for a few minutes in between every hour, you can just do 30 seconds on each side, something like that. I do that personally. It makes a huge difference in how I stand, how I walk, low back pain, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't take nearly as long. You can do it right at your desk. It's very simple.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, we're already at 40 minutes. This is going by very quickly because it's fascinating stuff. But Drew's going to, he has videos of all of these exercises. I know he sent us 3. And once the podcast is released, since you guys are listening to it, in the show notes, if Drew wants to share a few of these exercises with us, we can put them in the show notes along with his website so you can check out how to do these things properly. And then obviously contact him if you want some more help and things like that. So, Drew, give us a wrap up. Give us something quick that, again, you said it's obviously everyone is different. Everyone's specific, with neck pain or shoulder pain or whatever. And I love the hip flexor thing because I actually started doing that after you talked to us last week, and it does help. It's really, I'm seeing it already. It just is definitely helpful. So give us one thing that all of us can do, or you would recommend that the average person sitting at the desk for 6-7 hours a day should be doing, besides the hip flexor thing.
Besides the hip flexor thing. Okay. I would say that's a tough one because a lot of things come to mind.
Yeah. So I don't want to put you on the spot because I know everyone is different. It's a good question. I know everyone's different, so you can't. It's not one size fits all. But if there is something you can impart on us, that would be great. If not, I understand.
No. So here's what I think. So because everybody is different, and you are going to run into that problem. You're always going to run into that problem when it comes to fixing these types of problems. When it comes to fixing these types of things, of the problem of specificity with the individual case, there is always going to be that. I would say to anybody out there that's running into particular issues, start paying attention closely, very closely, to the positions that you spend time in that make things worse, because that will start to clue you in as to what is going on. Your pain, your aches, your discomfort are not things to shy away from. Exploring what those are and being very conscious and very aware of them, reshaping the way that you interact with pain can change the course of your health long term for the rest of your life. When you notice something doesn't feel right, figure out why and figure out something that you can do about it. Figure out what thing you can do to mitigate it, how you can adjust your environment to accommodate it. Don't just say, this hurts, I'm not going to do anything about it. That's something that I think a lot of people do when they run into an issue. Like, yeah, just normal, going to move on. And that's not a bad thing. There is some of that we all need to have some of that. But at the same time, changing your relationship with pain and aches and this type of stuff, because yes, it's normal, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's okay. And so start paying attention to that stuff. Be really aware of it and take notes, get comfortable with it, and then start to just make little changes and see how those affect things. If you can do that, you'll be light years ahead of anybody else that doesn't. Because if you don't pay attention to it, you don't even know what the problem is.
Or if you just take ibuprofen every day, and that's right. I mean, that's not going to help you either.
Pain medication has got to be the worst solution to pain. Because pain is only a symptom of a problem. It's not the root cause. So if you cover up the cause, it's only going to expand, become more of a problem, and then you'll be in a real dark place with a lot of major issues. And so don't go there. Pay attention to what's going on.
All right. So tell everyone where they can find you, and we're going to wrap it up. But just how they find you and what can they do from here to get in touch with you.
LinkedIn is the one place you got to go. I'm there every day, all the time, and that's it. Just LinkedIn, Drew Hulburt, DrewHulburt. That's me. I'm the guy with the orange branding. It's pretty hard to miss me. And so, if you want to get in touch, you just have a question, you heard something on here you're interested in, or you just want to know a little bit more. If you couldn't find the show notes and you still want some of those extra stretches, all that stuff's on there. A lot of it's in my content. So just go give me a follow, send me a connection request, and I'm more than happy to have you in my network, and we can get to know each other.
Awesome, Drew. Well, really, I really appreciate your time. I bet everyone listening appreciates what they heard tonight, and hopefully everyone will start feeling a little better once they start listening to you. But everyone, I really encourage you to check out his content, check out his stretching, because I started it. It's been helping me, and I have chronic back pain, and I've been pretty good for a week. So I'm a testament right now that this stuff is working. So Drew, thanks very much for joining me tonight. It was great having you. And everyone here, we are taking off. This has been episode number 7 of Marketing and Sales Over Cocktails. This is Alan Langer with the 7 Secrets Center for Sales and Marketing, and we will see you all next time.